Biochar is a blank slate given to the soil. It is a carbon-packed material. It looks similar to charcoal. That's where the char comes from, yeah? And then it is carbon-filled and it is very porous in nature. So what biochar does is that once you mix it with more nutrients, for example, you have compost in your farm, you have manure, it absorbs all these nutrients and then it stores it. It's like a sponge. You see the way you put a sponge in water, puts the water, then the sponge is now filled with the water. Same to biochar. Acting as a sponge in the soil, it pulls all the nutrients and then it stores it. Then what it does over time is that it slowly releases it back into the soil. So what we do is we use organic biomass. So you take organic waste, you make it go through a process we call pyrolysis. So this is simply just reducing the amount of oxygen during burning. And then what comes out of it is what we call biochar. To give more context, you see how we burn bricks. So you create the clay bricks, you put it in the kiln, you cover it, you burn it over a very long period of time. Similar concept, because you are suppressing oxygen in this particular kiln. We have the technology whereby we can burn more agricultural waste in the suppression of oxygen to produce the biochar.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Organic Guy podcast. This is your home of organic conversations. I'm your host, the Organic Guy, and right around here we have conversations on how we can make our food systems really get to work for us rather than against us. And today I want us to have a conversation around carbon. It's something that has been on the headlines of late on its impact in the climate change conversations. To have this conversation, I've got a very special guest with us. They are doing an amazing work in terms of seeing how we can actually capture carbon, get to store it, and see how we can sort of use it to regenerate our soils and help restore our ecosystems. He goes by the name of Antony, is the business lead for BIOSORRA. They have been named as one of the beneficiaries of Elon Musk foundation called X Prize, as well as Jeff Bezos Earth Fund as well. So it's just a clear indication that they're doing something different and something impactful. So for me, it's a pleasure to have him in the podcast. Anthony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Brian.
I mean, from what I just mentioned, looks you guys are doing an amazing work. You've received recognition from Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. So that means you're doing something right. And I can't get to go into in depth of some of the things you're doing. But before we get into that, just give us a little bit of background about yourself. How did you find yourself in this space? And just where did you grow up? How was the environment like growing up?
So Antony is my name. Currently doing business development at BIOSORRA. Growing up, we are called Bontau. Been in the streets for a very long time. But where I crossed paths with agriculture was when I was in high school. To be honest, coming from a city perspective, it really did not give a proper shine to it of how it was introduced to us. So during the choosing, because I was in the 844 system, during the choosing of the subjects, I wanted to pursue agriculture by itself, but I ended up just going the business way because I understood that's where the money is. Or rather, that's what we were told. That's where money is. It's in business. Rightfully so. But when I was doing my Form 4, I remember there was a punishment that I was given to go dig up an acre. And there was nothing glamorous about it. So only so it solidified my decision to do business. Left that, ventured into architecture. So my major is actually in architecture. Tried it. I did not like it. I didn't like being boxed in. I am a creative by nature. So I need to go out. I need to understand how systems work. And then I need to come back and see what solutions can we bring into the environment. So after which, I found myself at Glovo. This was early 2020. So right at the onset of COVID, a lot of projects were stalled. Now, when the project was stalled, I found myself, I need to find something to do. And so I found myself venturing with a friend of mine. So went into the Glovo offices. I found there were interviews going on. Applied, got selected, moved on to do business. And I was in the restaurant section. Glovo is mostly known for food. I was in the restaurant section. And majority of the people that I met during the onboarding of these restaurants were very focused on organic products when they were coming in. So I used to wonder. So we are going in for a meeting, then receiving is happening. But the companies that are bringing, there are particular ones that had the labels of fully organic. And I used to wonder, why is there more advocacy for organic products to be used in these particular restaurants. And they were mostly the high-end restaurants that were pushing for this agenda. And organic is expensive. So that piqued my curiosity. Come down 3-4 years down the line, a friend of mine invited me to explore pushing business in BIOSORRA, since that is what I was more focused on. And I found myself in an environment where we are not only pushing for full organic, but also there is the impact side of it, of not only addressing climatic justice, but in this other side also impacting the smallholder farmer and how do we enrich their lives, enrich their soils. And that's my journey through being born, raised in Nairobi, finding myself in architecture, pushing on into tech, and now I'm in the organic side of it.
Interesting, because even when you say like in tech with our Glovo, I think to a large extent with BIOSORRA, it's a tech to some extent, right? In terms of like how you're able to capture carbon and then, store it and make it useful to farmers. So just give us a little bit of context. What is, we've mentioned about BIOSORRA, but what is it and what does it actually do?
So at BIOSORRA, we are a climate tech company. And what we do is we produce a product called biochar. However, as a company, we try to address climatic justice. So how can we reduce emissions into the environment and how can we positively impact the life of the farmer? So for us, it's more of addressing the need for the farmer, which is one, we have noticed that over time, we have ended up degrading our soils terribly. The picture that has been sold to a lot of the farmers is that you need a lot of fertilizer. And I've interacted with a lot of coffee farmers. And you'll find someone inherited land from their father, from father's father, 65, 70 years down the line, they know I only apply NPK 17, 17, 17 to my land. That's all they know. And trying to change that person's perspective from you're hurting your soil is like, no, but this is what I found being done. The tree is 65, 70 years old, and that's what we've always been feeding it. So for us, it's trying to change the narrative now. So we are impacting the climate by how we are removing carbon from the environment. We are storing it into biochar because we understand what carbon can do to the soil, and then we are advising and we are talking to the smallholder farmers, to farmers in general, advising them on how can we make your soil better. One thing that I've come to understand is soil is the gut, it's the stomach of the plant, and whatever you feed it, it's a full circle. You feed the plant will pull it, it will store it for you, you'll buy it very expensively in the supermarket, come and ingest it, and then it's a full circle.
At least I think most people understand what is carbon. At least they have interacted in one way or another. But how does that work? How do you take like carbon that is sort of in the atmosphere and actually capture it and put it into a form that can then be used with farmers? What is the science behind it?
It's a bit too technical. I will explain it through our product, which is biochar. So in the production of fertilizer, there's a lot of emissions that go out into the environment. But you can measure how much you can reduce by reducing the amount of fertilizer that you use. So for example, if you use 100 kgs of fertilizer in your farm, if I can make you use 70 kg, 60 kg, 50 kg, there's an amount X that you have stopped using. Meaning if it is stopped being produced, that is saving to the environment. That is emissions that have not been put out into the environment. But then these 30, 40 kgs that you've not used, you need to do something to the soil. You need to put back the nutrients because these are nutrients that you're not putting into the soil. So the soil needs something in place of the fertilizer that you were supposed to use. So what we do is we use organic biomass. So you take organic waste, you make it go through a process we call pyrolysis. So this is simply just reducing the amount of oxygen during burning. So you can burn in the smallest amount of oxygen possible, or sometimes even in non-existent oxygen. And then what comes out of it is what we call biochar. So you can have biochar in very many different forms according to the waste or the organic matter or the agricultural waste that you have used. You can have biochar from rice husk, from coffee husks, from coconut shavings. So it's upon whoever is making the biochar to decide, because of the needs of my farm, this is the waste that I'm going to use to burn and then put it back into the soil. Now, case in point, in the process of burning, it's very important to know that when you burn something, it produces emissions. Our carbon is again produced and it is put back into the soil. That's why it is critical to use the proper methods or the proper technology in order to do this burning. And that's where BIOSORRA comes in. We have invested heavily in the technology to make sure that the process under which we are producing the biochar is properly done.
So the tech part is once you're burning the material, let's say like rice husks, the CO2 that's supposed to be released when it's burning. It's what's captured in the biochar. So does that mean like you can mix different carbon stuff? So let's say like rice husk and then maize stalks, you can sort of mix them and still the end product will be the same.
You can mix them to get the biochar. You can have sticks, you can have the maize cobs, you can have the rice husk together and burn it to get biochar in the end. So it is possible, it is a possibility. And then now you can go and do a lab analysis of the end product to understand the chemical composition of the biochar that you have produced. So it is dependent on the farmer or the producer to decide what materials they will use to produce the end product, which is now the char.
So anything that has like carbon in it can actually be used to produce biochar.
But as BIOSORRA, we advocate for full organic. So use use organic waste to push for the production of biochar. To give more context, maybe you see how we burn bricks or how we make bricks. So you create the clay bricks, you put it in the kiln, you cover it, you burn it over a very long period of time. Similar concept, because you are suppressing oxygen in this particular kiln. So similar concept with biochar. We have the technology whereby we can burn more agricultural waste in the suppression of oxygen to produce the biochar.
Yeah. So and then this biochar thing, what is it? As in, okay, now you've burned, let's say, the material, the rice husks. You've produced this thing called biochar. Like, what is in it? Like, what is it in terms of nutrient? How does that look like?
When we speak about the nutrient composition of biochar, it varies from the material that you use to produce it. That's one thing that we really need to take note. So you'll find people using mathenge because it is an invasive species. So part of climatic justice is because it is invasive, we can use it to, burn it and produce the biochar. So there is that aspect as well. However, the chemical composition again is deeply rooted in the material that you decide to burn to produce the biochar. But biochar, in essence, is a carbon-packed material. It looks similar to charcoal. That's where the char comes from, yeah? And then it is carbon-filled and it is very porous in nature. So what biochar does is that once you mix it with more nutrients, for example, you have compost in your farm, you have manure, and what biochar does, it absorbs all these nutrients and then it stores it. It's like a sponge. You see the way you put a sponge in water, puts the water, then the sponge is now filled with the water. Same to biochar. Acting as a sponge in the soil, it pulls all the nutrients and then it stores it. Then what it does over time is that it slowly releases it back into the soil. So the plant has more time to interact with the nutrients, to pull the nutrients, to have better root development. The essence of biochar is also in water storage. So it sucks in the water, then it stores it, and then slowly releases it back into the soil.
So does that mean biochar by itself doesn't have nutrients?
So biochar is a blank slate given to the soil to be amended. So you'll find, again, as I said, the chemical composition of biochar, it is dependent on whatever material you use to burn. So it has phosphorus, it has boron, it has oxygen. You can measure your C/N ratio. So it has all these things. But the soil itself needs something more. For example, nitrogen is a big issue that the crops require, especially if someone is doing a lot of monocropping. So what we advocate for is that biochar is not a replacement for. It is supposed to use in conjunction with. So you partner it together. Can you use biochar by itself? Yes, you can. Will it give you, especially people who are doing commercial farming, will it give you the same results as mixing it maybe with manure or compost? Not necessarily. Maybe the yield will be a bit lower, but in essence, still works by itself. But what do we advocate for? Use it together with your manure, with your compost, then put it back into the ground. We need to store the nutrients. So as a soil amender, it needs to regenerate the soil back to its more fertile state over time, because we've not ruined soil in 1 year. Because I meet a lot of farmers and they ask me, Antony, if I put this thing in the ground, do I need to use it again next year? And I tell them, we've used fertilizer for 65 years. There is no way that I'm going to magically change your soil in just 1 year. So it takes a bit of time to heal the soil, to make it back more fertile. You know what the fertilizer does? Sometimes it burns all the microorganisms. Even the roots cannot be able to penetrate. The land becomes too compact. So biochar does is organisms are introduced back into the soil. It creates a more conducive environment for these things to thrive.
Interesting. I didn't know that part about biochar, but that's a quite interesting perspective. In terms of like working with farmers, you said you were big in terms of like helping small scale farmers. Is there some improvements you've noticed in terms of, I'm assuming you've worked with some farmers already. Like, is there an interesting example in terms of like you've given it to a farmer and the farmer is like, you know what, I've seen real change when I'm using your biochar?
Definitely. We like working with cooperatives a lot because with the cooperative, you get access to a lot of farmers. You can get a cooperative with 3,000, 4,000 farmers all at once. Now, with organic farming, every farm is different. And we need to understand, it's not like, fertilizer can be told for coffee, it's 26, 12, 6, whatever. But when you're working with farmers, we like to go to the grassroots level. We need to understand your own practices. We need to understand your soil composition. We need to understand what have you been doing and how do we make it better. So even in the most well-managed farms, one thing is evident. We are using a lot more inputs. We're getting way less yields. So when we are working with farmers, we usually go for 3 key value propositions. 1, how can we regenerate your soil? And by soil regeneration, we usually take it as whatever you're putting in the soil is how good or bad the soil will be. If you're feeding it a lot of pizza, most probably the health is not so good. But if it is a mix of, some skooma here, some veggies, a bit of carbs, proper proportions of protein, you enhance the health of the soil. So with farmers, we have seen it. I've talked and I've worked a lot with a lot of coffee farmers. And one thing that we have noticed is from the first time application alone of just biochar and manure, which is found right at home. First time application, we have noticed a pH balancing, because a lot of acidity has been put into the soil. So we need to regulate the soil to be a bit more basic. 6, 7, okay, depending on the crop that you want to plant. Of course, this is heavily advised by the agronomist or the soil test centers that a person goes to. And a lot of farmers do not do soil tests. So this is an advocacy right now. Please make sure you test your soil. So depending on the soil testing that has been brought forward, you are able to advise. And we've seen pH regulation. We have seen increase in nutrient efficiency. We have seen increase in yield up to 26, 30% sometimes. So you find a coffee tree actually bending because now the bean is fuller. They have more time with the nutrients in the soil. They're able to pull in the nutrients. They're able to pull in the water. It's fuller. And what happens when the bean is fuller is that you can sell it at a higher price because the quality goes higher. So what we are trying to do is we are putting back money into the farmer's pocket. That's 1. 2, how can we also reduce the amount of inputs that you're putting in? How much money are you spending to get this fertilizer? How much money are you spending to make sure your land is properly irrigated? So what biochar does, again, because of the nature of its porosity, that it's able to lock in the nutrients and put it in the longer period of time, you find that over time you're able to reduce the cost that you are incurring in putting more nutrients into the soil or even irrigating. Because with biochar, you can be able to capture up to 98% of the water and lock it into the ground. For example, if you're irrigating 3 times in a week, you only need now to irrigate once because the water is captured and it is stored there. Yeah. So you're cutting input cost, you're getting more yields, and your soil is getting better over time.
So how much of it do you need to use in terms of, because you said like it can sort of help act like a sponge when you're using water and sort of can store water. Does that mean like you need a handful of it when you're using, let's say, for a crop?
Again, with organic farming, you have to be very particular. Which crop? I can give an overview. For example, if I go to coffee farmers, I will tell them use 2 to 3 kgs of biochar per coffee tree. Dig a trench around the canopy of the tree where the root hairs are mostly predominant. Apply the biochar with the manure or with the compost already mixed. Apply it in the trench. Cover it with the topsoil. That's a coffee farmer. I'll go to a macadamia farmer. I tell them, you know what? For your macadamia tree or your avocado tree, you'll need 5-6 kgs of biochar premixed. I will go to a horticulture farmer, someone who's maybe doing chilies. Chilies, it's even better. It's just a handful, around 35-50 grams of biochar mixed. Put it in the soil. That will work for you. So it is very dependent on the crop. And as BIOSORRA, what we do is we work with the farmer every single step of the way. There is no way I'll just put out a product and I'll tell you, this biochar is good for your soil. No. I really need to understand what your current practices in the farm are, what challenges are we trying to resolve, and how can I ultimately make you money? Because in the end, its commercial purposes that, is pushing us to get into agribusiness. But we also push for the large farms as well. And this, in hindsight, is also to the benefit of the smallholder farmers. Some mega commercial farms do hire out land. I come and I say, hey, I will use your land for the next 20 years. But in these 20 years, a lot happens in this land. By the time someone is inheriting this land and the contract is over, they are coming to start the process again, and it is 10 years. Before soil heals, it's 10, 15, sometimes up to 20 years. So we try to advocate also to the larger farms, hey, maybe it's your own land or maybe it's hired land, it's fine. But what the essence of it is, let us try to make the soil better. Let us rejuvenate the soil. Let's look at the health of the soil. Even if the doctors are there in the farm, the agronomist is there, we will still come and we'll say, hey, let's make this better.
Does this also mean that biochar is more useful like to perennials and annuals more than horticulture? Because I'm thinking in terms of you are having an horticultural farm that needs like 3, 4, 5 months and you're taking into the market. Do they still get the benefits in that short period of time?
Yes. From the first time application, you are able to see instant results. And during our pilot phases, for example, if you're piloting with a particular farmer, with a particular partner, we will say, okay, you are doing skuma wiki, for example. I will give you trial mixes. I'll say mix biochar with your manure or mix biochar with compost. This much, depending on the condition of the soil. Okay, let's look at the root development. Let's look at the stalk. Let's look at the leafiness. Let's look at how many branches are coming out from there. So it is not a perennial product. It cuts across all crops. Why am I saying this? It's because the healthier the soil is, the more it can produce for you. Bottom line is that it doesn't matter if you're doing trees or you're doing your horticulture. If you don't take care of your soil, there is no way it's going to feed you and your lifestyle, and your children inherit it and it fits them and their lifestyle. There is no way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a bottom line. And I think a lot more people have been talking about it of late, which is good to see. And treating the soil as a living entity is a very important part of our farming systems if we want to sort of continue to produce food for our future generations. Part of what you do is trying to get businesses. And one of the things that I usually come across, especially on carbon removal, because that's the whole point of trying to capture carbon, is the issue of carbon credits. So like for a layman who has heard about the word carbon credits, but they don't quite understand what it is, can you sort of like explain what it is and what is it all about?
Carbon credits it's like a license or a certificate. For every ton of carbon, because you measure carbon in tons, for every ton of carbon that has been removed from the environment or avoided from being put back into the environment. For projects that are put in place to advocate for more climate consciousness, so you'll find if someone is doing more afforestation, maybe they're putting up a forest in the desert somewhere. They can be able to change the climate in some way and capture a lot of carbon because the trees will take in carbon, put back oxygen. So these projects are usually audited. Depending on the type of project, they can be able to measure the impact that it has and how much carbon has been removed. And whoever has that project can be given a license, and then they'll be told, you've been able to remove X amount of carbon from the environment, so this is your license. And then they can trade this for monetary value so that at least it can be able to be plowed back into the system. They can raise more and raise more and raise more. So to a layman, is removing carbon to get a credit is putting up a project that can be able to remove or reduce the amount of carbon being put out. And then you get a license and you can say project X has been able to remove, for example, 1,000 tons. So if I have a manufacturing industry somewhere and they say I'm removing 1,000 tons of carbon, I'm putting it back. So I'm the one who's destroying the environment, right? So I'm able to offset and go to the person who's doing afforestation, tell them, hey, can I purchase 1,000 tons that I've put back into the environment, so that at least we can balance it out.
Is there a mathematical equation? Like, how do you get to measure, let's say I have a forest, like I've managed to offset this X amount of carbon. How does the process work?
So we do have auditors who come and do the calculation, and they'll be able to tell you X amount of carbon has been removed from this. And then it varies from time to time. And from project to project. It's not one way for every single project that this is the math. No, it varies from project to project, from the processes that you're using, because everything is logged. So there is a particular process that will help you maybe capture more carbon than another person who's doing something similar but a different process. So there is a math to it, and the auditors will be able to tell you from this particular process you're able to remove X amount of carbon, and then you're certified for that process.
I'm trying to think from a business standpoint, because the whole idea is, to sort of capture the carbon through biochar and get to sell it. So far, who are your biggest customers? Is it large-scale farmers or small-scale farmers?
It cuts across both. Because I can say I have a commercial farm who's maybe taking, let's say, 300 tons of biochar. Then I can have another cooperative which is made up of 3,000 smallholder farmers who are taking 500 tons of biochar. See? So it is cutting across board. It is easier to sell to a commercial farm than it is to sell to a smallholder farmer. Why am I saying this? It's because unless you're going through a platform where you get a lot of smallholder farmers all at once, it's quite difficult to convince every single smallholder farmer that you visit. So you need a platform or a place where you can find them all at once, explain the benefits, and then you can have them try the product, can try to do the scientific study on the soil prior to using, and even after using biochar, and then they can be able to see the difference. They can see the difference in the yield and in the performance of the soil and the crop itself, the health and everything. With a commercial farm, it might be a bit easier to have them try the product because, if I go into a farm, I'm like, you have 600 hectares of land. Let's try on 1 hectare, see the difference, and then move on from there. With a commercial farm, it's more business-centric, less on impact, but of course the impact is there. But yeah, how do we make the soil better so that we can produce more? On the smallholder farm, it's how do we make the soil better so that my generation can continue feeding off the land and I can feed even more people?
Yeah, so in terms of impact, small-scale farmers are much better. You mentioned earlier that working with small-scale farmers can be challenging. What has been your biggest challenge in terms of trying to convince farmers to adopt biochar?
The adoption part of it has been the biggest challenge. And I'll explain why. I think we have handheld our smallholder farmers too much. So whenever a new product is in the industry, it doesn't matter good or bad, we need to do a free trial, which is commercially not always feasible because in as much as, yes, we are producing the biochar using all organic products, it's a bit expensive, right? So we've done a lot of hand-holding, and before the farmer is convinced that they need to try the product, they will always want to have a free trial so that they can see the results and then think if they will adopt it or not. They'll think about it. And it will take some time. So that has been one of the biggest challenges that we've been facing. So how do we quickly get a farmer language that can be understood, even with the oldest of the oldest farmer that you'll find? Sometimes I go in deep into the country and you find a real mzee. You're telling them about biochar. And the easiest way maybe to talk about biochar to a mzee is like, when you burn ash, and that ash you can usually just put it in there. The benefits of ash. Yeah, it's something similar to that, yeah. So adoption has been the biggest challenge, and through adoption is through the free trials that maybe you have to push for because farmers don't want to pay for the trial. They want to see the results first. It doesn't matter how much data you have. You've done your scientific data good. Okay, now I want to see it in my own systems, my own way, how I plant, how I do my things. So that has been the biggest challenge. Also, getting in touch into these smallholder farmers is not easy because they are very widespread. Even if you're going to cooperatives, sometimes it's not easy to get to every single farmer because when they come to a very large group, it's very high level if you're explaining about it. But once you have that one-to-one conversation with the farmer, you go to the farm, they give you some tea, you sit down with them, you talk about their soil. It's a better experience. You get to understand them at that much deeper level and exactly what is ailing them. When we go to smallholder farmers and you get to understand, for example, before they get paid when the coffee comes in, they come, they take it to the cooperative, it goes to the auction, it's sold. Before they actually get money, it looks like 6 months, sometimes even 13 months. And it's a big challenge. And you're bringing in a new product that is promising heaven, I'm going to increase your yield, I'm going to cut your cost. And they'll say, okay, but I can't buy it right now because you've not been paid, because I have to wait for another 6 months to get paid. and before the 6 months elapse, I have so many other things in between here that I need to do with the money that is coming. So I've not received the money, but I've already pre-planned for what I'm going to do with it. So on the financial aspect of it, working with smallholders farmers has been a lot of hand holding again.
Is part of the problem, because I also see a lot of agri-tech face these problems. They come into a market and they're like, I'm going to offer just one product. Let's say like it's a loan product you're giving to farmers, but then immediately you realize you also need to fill the whole funnel. So for example, if you're giving farmers biochar, or maybe they're growing coffee, and then after the coffee is ready, they'll probably call you and say, hey, the coffee is ready, where should I sell it to? Is that a problem you've faced?
For BIOSORRA, no, we have not faced that problem. But I see where you're coming from. Having to impact the whole value chain is important. What we do is we can only promise until the yield part of it. So it's upon, and I think farmers need to do more research and understand, not just looking at the local market, but also opening up into more international markets. So you'll find a farmer whose only goal is, I get my yield, I take it to the cooperative, they will do the rest. But when you look at the more international markets, there is more value from the point of yield to export. There is more value addition that can be done. And I think this is what not only as BIOSORRA, but also even the government should come in and actually see how can we assist our farmers. It is important for us to impact the whole value chain, but the impact that I can do with biochar is I can add value to the bean, for example, that you're producing. Can I move it from one level to another? So that even if it goes to the auction, it can generate a higher price for you.
Yeah, so lazima wajipange kidogo.
Honestly, farmers need to take some time, learn about the markets, expand their knowledge base, and see how much more value can I get for whatever I'm producing. Even as a farmer, you can roast your own coffee, brand it nicely, because coffee as a need, it's really growing. It's becoming more posh. It's more fashionable, it's trendy. So how can you capitalize on that? How can you brand yourself to capitalize on that?
So part of BIOSORRA is, I saw you say that you are carbon negative. So I'm assuming that is like a ratio of what you produce versus what you use out there. So what does that mean?
Exactly as you've explained it perfectly. It's that we do we do not put carbon out, then we've been able to lock in.
So basically the goal then, I think in the long term, is there'll become a time where everybody or like every company has to be carbon neutral. Like that's the goal.
The story with climate is, of course, climate changes or weather changes every 35, 40 years. The climate of a place will change, right? And it is upon us to make sure that we do not, or if we have to interfere, it is in the minimal amounts completely. So for example, if someone is in manufacturing and they're putting a lot of carbon in there, they need to maybe set up projects that capture whatever they're putting out back. Yeah, so that's the carbon negativity that we are talking about. So yes, there is some action needed to be done, and it is producing carbon and it's putting it back out there. But what are the initiatives that we're putting in place in order to capture it back so that it is not out there but it is stored somewhere else? Yeah, you have projects that do direct carbon capture from the environment. So you have machineries in place that be able to suck in carbon. Again, we have the agroforestry part of it. So there are a couple of initiatives that people can do. I was explaining, for example, in the car, there is the start-stop function. So when the car is idle, you're able to stop the engine from running so it is not producing carbon back into the environment. So there are a couple of things that can be done in order to make sure that it is captured back. I think it is in UAE, they are now buying more land in Africa to try and set up more carbon capture or carbon sinks because now they can't do it there, so they have to look for another place to put the carbon. So it's an idea of, can I remove much more carbon from the environment than what I am putting back out?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've seen there's a lot of rumbles online in terms of like UAE coming mostly in Africa to buy land for their carbon projects. So that also brings in the question of sovereignty and like what is the role of like local indigenous people and sort of that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking like from corporate point of view, and the people who are buying credits, especially now from like BIOSORRA, or people have shown interest, are there more local organizations or more international organizations who are interested in buying carbon credits?
Okay, so a lot of companies have environmental and impact departments, and the main essence of environmental and impact departments is through the UN 2030, 2050 agendas that are in place, right? So how do we impact the environment? How do we impact people? There are a lot of agendas in there. So majority of local companies try to see ways they can reduce their own emissions, not buying, because it is possible to do. For example, if I go to a manufacturing company, they can say, I am doing a forestation project for example, in Kilifi, and I'm able to offset through that project because it will be audited and they will check how much carbon has been captured. They'll be able to see how much I've been able to offset from the production that I'm doing on this other side. More of purchasing will come from more international companies because there aren't that many projects out there that help.
Yeah, so that means then it's more of like international organizations that are more likely to buy such carbon credits than local. Let's say Safaricom.
It will be more international than it is local. For locals, they are more susceptible to doing their own projects to offset their own emissions, and it's not that much, to be honest. For example, in the in the Dubai or in the Arabian Peninsula, you'll find oil-producing factories, and they are huge, and they will do so much. So for them, it will be mandatory to try and find a better way to sequester all this carbon from the environment. So they will invest in bigger, much more better projects.
How scalable is this technology in terms of producing biochar? Because I'm thinking the raw materials are dependent on their availability, or like how far can we take this technology?
So if you go to a commercial farm, you can find an export farm having agricultural waste of 500, 600 tons every 2-3 weeks. That's a lot of waste. And from this, maybe they can compost 20-30% of it, and the rest is just somewhere sitting. So when it comes to the technology in place in order to scale biochar production, it is solely dependent on the processor because the waste is available. If you're doing it from an industrial level, you're just finding partners who will bring the waste to you, process, make the biochar, and then sell it and provide it to the farmers. If it is the local Juakali way, because you can make your own kiln and you can produce it for your own farm, the technology is there. The raw materials, definitely there. It's upon the processors. As long as the market is open, the processors will just scale up and produce more in order to fulfill the needs of the market. Now, again, as I said before, biochar is regenerative solution. So there is a point in time, if you have careful farming practices, that you might not need biochar as much because it is regenerative. The essence of biochar is to bring your soil back to its more fertile state. Will you stop using biochar? No. But will you reduce? Yes. Because you're still putting in fertilizer into the soil. So you will need, at some point you might need to reduce a bit because you've already healed the soil. This is 10, 20 years later. You've already healed the soil. It's more, it can be able to produce more, better quality crops. So you can start reducing the use of biochar, maybe introduce more compost, more manure for the microbial activity to thrive even better into the soil.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried there because looks like for a minute there you're going to put yourself out of business very soon. Okay.
Again, as I said, people have spoiled the land for 60, 70, 80 years. Practices have been ruining the soil, so it's not going to be happening overnight. It's going to take some time. And over time, as you regenerate the soil back to a more healthier state, you're able to reduce your inputs overall. There was a project we were doing with a potato farmer whereby we were just saying, if you just take the topsoil from a forest untouched, how much yield can it give you, or how much can we be able to push for a potato to grow? What's the taste, what's the size, and all these things? And then your normal shamba that you've done some things there, you introduce biochar, try to bring it to its healthier state and see the comparison. You're gonna get a lot of yield from the untouched forest soil because it is so alive. The trees that are there, the animals that are there, they just, they're dropping things there. There is, the leaves are decomposing, so the soil is so rich. And this is the richness that we want to bring to the shamba. That's the essence of biochar. How can I make this soil to be as good as that? The fertility of soil is kidogo sana. 20 centimeters, there about 15, 20 centimeters. It's topsoil. If you go and dig, you kona jembe, or you dig so deep, the fertility is just at the top. So how can we make this better?
I mentioned earlier, you are one of the beneficiaries of Elon Musk Foundation and also Jeff Bezos. So I'm just trying to think in the long term, what do you guys aim to achieve? Just getting to impact more small scale farmers? How does that look like in 10, 20 years from now?
The mission of BIOSORRA is to address climatic justice. So yes, we are impacting smallholder farmers. We are trying to reduce emissions that are being put out there. But how much carbon can we actually remove from the environment? Let's say we are pushing for 10,000 tons of carbon removal from the environment. We're scaling production of biochars that can be able to assist in this mega goal to remove this much carbon from the environment. So 10 years, 20 years from now, I would like to see BIOSORRA set up stations in every single county in Kenya, so that at least it is easier, biochar is more accessible to the farmer. One of the other biggest challenges that we usually face is in distribution, because I have one facility, it's in Thika. When you want biochar, I have to take it from Thika, I have to take it to Kisumu. This distance, if I'm using a heavy diesel vehicle to do this, I'm putting carbon back into the environment. So what we would like to see is, can we set up more locations that can be able to provide the biochar to the surrounding communities. So if I have one in Mombasa, Kilifi, Kisumu, so all these areas to be serviced with biochar much more easily. So that goes back to your question, is biochar production scalable? Yes, it is, because all these areas have something to offer that can be used to be the the raw materials in the provision and the production of biochar.
Looking forward to the progress when we are there, maybe 10, 20 years. So towards the end of the conversation, I have this thing I called rapid fire questions. So what I've done, I've prepared 10 questions for you. The idea is just I will throw these questions to you, and then you'll give me quick and short answers to them. Hopefully you guys will get a good idea about you. Are you ready?
Ready.
So the first question is, when you were a kid, what did you dream of becoming?
An artist.
A second, what's the biggest myth people believe about carbon credits?
Exactly that it's a myth.
Third question, what is one thing you can't start your day without?
Coffee.
Fourth question, what's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received is actually from a book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And the advice is, always look for an expert to help you move to the next level. Because the reason you're not in the next level is because there's something that you don't know. There's something that someone else knows that you need to know. Always look for an expert.
So the other question is, what is your favorite Kenyan meal?
Ugali, nyama, na skuma with avocado.
Seventh question, what book has influenced you most in your life?
The most impactful book, I'll just say it would be the Bible, because grown up in a super Christian household, both parents being in ministry. So the Bible has been my most impactful book, but I'll give you my second most impactful book, which is Think and Grow Rich.
What quote keeps you grounded on your tough days?
Come on me, always be 1% better. The days that will be tough, but do what you can on that day. And there are days that will be super good. Do even more than what you can on those particular days. But on every single day, be it tough, be it good, always be 1% better. It compounds.
So the last one, if you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice could you tell them?
Don't have a fixed mindset. Explore. Don't go to college. Explore first. The world has a lot to offer.
Very, very important. Okay. Yeah, those are 10 questions. Thank you very much for making time for the podcast. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing an insight into the world of biochar and carbon capture and carbon credits. Really, really appreciated it. So if guys want to follow you or your work, how could they do that?
Yeah, I will give my number. You can WhatsApp me. You can call me. It's 0701 754 315. Our website is BIOSORRA.com, so you'll find us there. You can leave an email, you can WhatsApp us, all our contact information is there as well. If you have questions about biochar, please feel free to reach out. We are able to discuss more, we're able to understand your soil more, so at least we can give the best advice that is there. Again, with organic farming, it's farmer to farmer, it's not general. We need to understand you as a person so that we can be able to assist.
All right, till the next one, remember to be organic. Cheers.